Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Chentex Multimedia live stream on this 13th day of April 2021. I once again welcome to this show on this very auspicious day. Auspicious day meaning, for the Hindus, it is the New Year. So all the best wishes for Ram Navami from all of us at Chentex Proprietary Limited, which is also trading as GlobeNet Realty, Brisbane Indian Times, Australian Indian Radio, and Chentex Multimedia. Well, of course, when we look at the Hindu New Year, it is also celebrated with many different names in different parts of India as well as Ugadi, Gudi Padwa, Baisakhi, Vishu, Maha, Vishu Sankranti, Cheti Ched, Poila Boisakhi, Bihu, Navratre, Navarsha, Vestu Varsa, and Chaitra Kilai Visa. So, in whichever way, in whichever language you want to say it, we'd like to wish you all a very, very happy New Year. As we know, this is the way Hindus follow the New Year is not on the Georgian calendar, but on Bikram Samrat, so, following that system. Well, of course, right now, this year, we are so fortunate that Ramadan and Ram Navami begins at the same time. So we sing all our Muslim brothers and sisters Ramadan Mubarak as well. So it is wonderful that this auspicious occasion coincides with Ram Navami this year, and it is wonderful to see all that happening. So ladies and gentlemen, don't forget that why and how the Hindu New Year is celebrated. We'll bring to you a special documentary after our normal show, which is for the news update for today. We will bring that after our normal show finishes, and it will be brought to you by the courtesy of Old Well Gayatri Parivar in Haridwar. So right now, let's get on with the move and with the news. First of all, let's take a look at, looking out the window, it looks like a glorious day out there. But to tell you more about what it is like going to be today, let's welcome Dilraj.
Good morning everyone. Weather forecast for the rest of today is maximum 25 degree. Brisbane area is partly cloudy with very slight chance of any rain, that is 5%, and it is with light winds. Fire danger is low to moderate. Sun protection is recommended till 40 past 2, and UV index is predicted to reach 7, that is high. Till tomorrow, stay safe and enjoy the rest of your day.
And thank you very much for that update, Dilraj. And as the UV index is getting up there, so it is recommended that you keep up to date with the your sun protection and everything like that. So it's wonderful. It's good to see that the sun out once again, and it's not raining. But as we know that in certain parts of Australia we've had this storm. Let's take a look at that update.
This is the main street of Kalbarri.
Tropical cyclone Saroja crossed the coast as a Category 3. It hit hard and fast.
This is just the people's roofs up and down the street.
Early estimates are that 70% of Kalbarri, a popular tourist town, has been damaged. As winds of 170 kilometres an hour swept through the community. Homes and businesses not built to withstand cyclonic winds were torn apart.
I've been in a couple of cyclones before, but nothing like that. Hearing, I think, the asbestos roofs travel through the air and hit glass was probably the worst.
Even after the system passed, residents remained under red alert inside their homes, concerned about fallen electricity poles and the debris littering the streets. With electricity gone, many had to wait until daylight to see how badly their homes were damaged.
So many people now homeless, eh? Like myself and a few other people, they're all homeless. There's no roofs left, there's nothing. We've got no power, I have to stay here.
Some weathered the storm aboard their boat.
We had to be on board so that we could lengthen the ropes, otherwise you'd virtually tear the rails off.
Saroja moved rapidly inland at 50 to 60 kilometres an hour, dumping massive amounts of rain along its path. Kalbarri had record rains, more than 160 millimetres in 24 hours.
There's been a range of iconic landmarks that have been destroyed in this event, namely the Carnarvon 1 mile jetty.
There goes the fence.
There have been some reports of minor injuries.
But no major injuries and no deaths, and that's obviously good news for those communities.
But authorities are still assessing damage in homes and farms. Contact in the region is difficult, with phone lines and mobile services not working and power to 30,000 homes and businesses disrupted. Evelyn Manfield, ABC.
And of course, as we know, that the damage is still being assessed in the aftermath of Saroja. So let's take a look at that report.
Commissioner Clem, thanks for your time tonight. Has the danger passed now for Western Australia?
Yes, the ex-tropical cyclone Saroja has now been downgraded to a low and has actually moved off the West Australian coast south of Esperance and is now in the Southern Ocean, and so the threat has passed.
Have you been able to assess the extent of the damage that's been done in the cyclone's path?
It's early days yet, Laura, but we do know that there has been significant damage from 170 km/h winds in some places, and the fact that the cyclone crossed just to the south of the coastal town of Kalbarri has meant that there has been significant damage to structures in Kalbarri and into a town about approximately 100 kilometres inland called Northampton. Those are possibly the two areas that have been most affected that we've been able to look at today. But we do know that there has been other roof losses and structural damage through other smaller towns further inland. So it's spread over quite a wide area. It was a very, very fast-moving cyclone. Once it made landfall, some 50, 60 kilometres an hour, it moved across the ground. And so the devastation has been quite widespread.
Well, what's your assessment of how long it's likely to be before you can restore power to those areas?
Yeah, it's certainly going to be days rather than hours to get the power reconnected. Over 30,000 customers are currently without power in the affected area. Very, very mindful of that. But Western Power, the local company here in Western Australia, are working really hard to get crews in there. They've had a helicopter out there today assessing the main transmission lines, which are the main feeder lines into the area, which are a really critical part about getting those back up and running to get power back out. So that work's underway, but the expectation at the moment certainly days.
Commissioner, thanks for your time tonight.
And thank you very much for that update. As we know, the damage is still being assessed, and of course, our condolences and wishes with that community there. Well, right now, for the next news, what we have been following is the vaccination, and of course, there have been so many different ups and downs on it, so many predictions that were made, so many targets that were set that is not going to be met. Let's hear from Dr. Norman Swan as he discusses the rollout.
The fact that the targets have now been lifted, it's very hard to have a strategy if you've got no targets. And the rollout, for last night at 7:30, I did the numbers. So there are about 12 million people between 15 and 50. There are about 8.4 million people over 50. So the minister's right. We've got enough Astra there. Now, if we got 1 million doses a week from local production, we could be done and dusted with the first dose within 8 weeks. But I don't think that we're going to be able to do that just with general practice. General practice is going to be important, but it's a difficult logistic exercise. We're going to have to include the states. But the states have got these high throughput centres and no vaccine to push them through. And then there's Pfizer. Now, they've known for 2 or 3 weeks, probably 3 weeks, that there was likely to be a problem with the Astra vaccine and the clots. And what they should have been doing is stopping giving Pfizer to aged care and preserving every single Pfizer dose for healthcare workers aged under 50, because they're the high priority group, amongst others, including people with disability, for the vaccination. But they haven't, and they are still today still immunising aged care facilities with Pfizer, when elderly people will do very well on Astra, and you can preserve the Pfizer for other people. So we're not marshalling what we have well. Pfizer says there's no problem with supply. There is a problem with supply of Pfizer. They're not giving us enough early enough. Later on this year is too late. We've actually got to get it now. Winter is coming, and we've got to actually accelerate our immunisation schedule. Otherwise, I'm talking to people who live in Victoria, you know what happened last winter.
Yeah, we want to avoid that. But
So yes, with coming winter, it is going to be hard, and we need to put those control measures in place now, as Dr. Norman Swan says. Well, what did our Prime Minister do? Well, as per this report, that he abandons the vaccination targets in the scheme.
Hi, Mrs. Jones, Joe here. You're over 50 and you've got diabetes, so it's important we do vaccinate you. Well, we had 11 patients booked in because that's how many doses we get out of a vial, and they were all over 80, but we still had 4 ring up and cancel. Won't be till well into next year before we get the entire population done. So you swab every patient first.
Like many other GPs across the country, Dr. Joe Garra is scrambling to handle a wave of cancellations.
They're mainly asking about side effects, and side effects are much more common in the younger cohort. If they've got multiple medical illnesses, and then they probably should still have the vaccine, because we're coming up into winter soon, so people are going to be indoors more and more chance of it spreading then.
Today, the Victorian government paused delivery of the AstraZeneca vaccine for people under 50 for 2 weeks, leaving GPs in that state uncertain of what's next.
No, there's been no mention of GPs getting Pfizer. Out of 10, I'd give the rollout probably a 5. I mean, I think we're doing the best we can. All GPs want from the federal government really is more vaccine and less red tape.
Some GPs have expressed anxiety about being held legally responsible if patients experience side effects from the AstraZeneca vaccine. But the federal government is encouraging them to continue the rollout.
I want to make something very, very clear. Australia already has vaccine indemnity agreements in place. So no doctor need worry. I am saying this on behalf of the government, but also on behalf of our legal advice.
This is a major setback. It really does put a lot more pressure on our public health systems.
Infectious diseases expert Dr. Michelle Anandaraja is from an advocacy group representing frontline pandemic workers.
I think the priority is to actually complete vaccination of 1A, the first responders. This is incredibly important, and of course people in aged care.
We're getting daily questions about what's happening, when's it happening. It's making us feel like we're not meeting our duty of care by not being able to get vaccinated.
There we go. Great, thank you.
All aged care residents and staff were supposed to be vaccinated by now because they're part of the highest priority group.
How good, thank you. How are you?
But Glenview Aged Care CEO Lucy O'Flaherty says they still haven't received their jab.
So 77% of our staff are under the age of 50, but for us that means that we've got a significant proportion of our staff and volunteers who actually don't meet the criteria for AstraZeneca, so we need to have some answers quickly to find out what's happening around the plan B for the Pfizer vaccination.
And of course, as per plan, all of the aged care workers and people in those homes should have been vaccinated, but that didn't happen. Well, of course, the best laid plans can go wrong. Now, who is going to take the blame is the big question. So, is it a blame game, or is it moving on with the task at hand and try and cooperate and do the best as we can under those circumstances, as things can be promised, but if it is reliant on a third party to deliver, there could always be problems. Well, right now, looking at another way, as they say, music is the balm of troubled minds. And right now, Didgeridoo is being played in Canberra. Let's take a look at that report. And isn't that wonderful? Music is the best therapy, as they reckon. So, it is good to see that the didgeridoo they're being playing in the Canberra hospitals, of course, are a very, very good move. Well, before we go on to the second part of today's news, which is international news, let's take a look and a message from our sponsors.
GlobeNet Realty. GlobeNet Realty has been the longest established, trusted and respected agency in its trade area. Washa Chandra, Director of GlobeNet Realty, provides honest and ethical service to her customers. If you are thinking of investing in Brisbane real estate market, or if you are seeking professional property management, then you should contact Usha Chandra today on landline 3865 4466 or mobile 0419 775 416. And for further updates, log on to our website www.globenetralty.com.au. GlobeNet Realty is your own local real estate agency. Situated at Shop 52281 Sandgate Road, Boondall. GlobeNet Realty. Real estate is our world.
And real estate is the world, and don't forget that tomorrow we'll bring to you the real estate update with Usha Chandra of GlobeNet Realty, looking at the property trends upmarket and where are the places to invest and what is actually happening in the real estate field. Well, right now, as I meant, this segment we go to the world news. Well, of course, right now all eyes are on the national mourning in England.
Ever since the dashing young prince married the queen-to-be, his role was set. Not to lead, but to follow. Not to command, but to obey. A lifetime of 2 steps behind, a job he filled with tireless energy and the capacity for gaffes.
I mean, can you get Radio 3 on?
I think he always kind of strove for kind of humour as a way of kind of being approachable. I think all of his gaffes, as they're called, were his attempts to be approachable. I'd say to be the accessible face.
But I do remember the one in 2002 in Cairns when they were on the Golden Jubilee tour and he was talking away to an Aboriginal leader, and the chap seemed quite happy and quite relaxed and was smiling, and all of a sudden I was the only reporter there actually in the room, and I saw this guy's face, it just fell, and I thought, he said something there, and I said to him, what did the Prince just say to you? And he said, he's just asked me, do we still throw spears at each other? And of course it made headlines around the world and went down as one of Prince Philip's most famous gaffes.
Prince Philip was born into the Greek royal family, but was forced to flee into exile in France, a period where he barely saw his father. Taken under the wing of Lord Louis Mountbatten, the now British naval officer saw active service during World War II.
He was very strong and fought a good war and was actually mentioned in dispatches twice.
But his life was forever changed when he met a young Elizabeth, who clearly fell for the handsome but penniless naval officer.
And they thought he was rough and ready and wasn't necessarily going to be a good husband. So he had to fight for all of that, and that was difficult for him. But eventually he came through, and I think people respected him.
Without his princess, then his queen, we would never have known about Prince Philip. Without her prince supporting her, Her Majesty may well have been a lesser monarch, a reduced Queen of Australia.
If you regard the Queen's reign as a massive success, a lot of that is down to the love and support she got from Prince Philip, and I don't think she could possibly have done the job without him.
With his wife rather busy as head of numerous nations, including our own, Prince Philip assumed a lead role in organising what proved to be a fractious family.
Like all families, we went through the full range of pleasures and tribulations of bringing up children. I'm naturally somewhat biased, but I think our children have done rather well under very different and difficult and demanding circumstances.
I think he suffered the way that you could argue a typical man of his generation, seeing what children go through in kind of, they're all kind of post-war babies. Therefore, things like divorce weren't kind of everyday occurrences when he was young growing up.
But I think the one mistake that Philip did make was to put pressure on Prince Charles to marry Princess Diana. She was too young, that she wasn't ready for it, and she wasn't suited. Looking back, obviously we know what happened. The marriage was a disaster, but of course it produced William and Harry, so it wasn't a total disaster.
I think that the main lesson that we've learnt is that tolerance is the one essential ingredient of any happy marriage. It may not be quite so important when things are going well, but it is absolutely vital when things get difficult. And you can take it from me that the Queen has the quality of tolerance and abundance.
When it came to choosing an education for the King-in-Waiting Prince Charles, Philip looked to his old school, Gordonston in Scotland.
And he wanted to toughen Charles up, and unfortunately Charles wasn't in the same mould as his father, and it nearly broke him. He was very, very unhappy there, Charles, and was bullied, and Philip didn't really have much sympathy for that.
One thing father and son could agree on was a passion for alternative energy. For years, Prince Philip drove an electric-powered van, years ahead of his time. Prince Philip shared another love for Australia. He joined the Queen on her many official visits and added a few of his own.
I think Australia, like all the other Commonwealth countries, has lost a great figure. He absolutely adored Australia, there's no doubt about that. He made 16 visits to Australia on his own since he married the Queen, as well as the 16 visits with her.
And inadvertently, the Prince contributed to the downfall of an Australian Prime Minister. Tony Abbott's political fortunes headed south with his unpopular announcement Prince Philip would be honoured with a knighthood.
I'm just really pleased that in his 90s, towards the end of a life of service and duty, we in this country are able to properly acknowledge what he's done for us.
I always find the Australian views of kind of the monarchy tends to be relevant to what's happening in Australia at the particular time. I think all I can say is at that particular moment in time, they didn't feel it was appropriate for him. If it had been 10 years later or previously, who knows?
But right now all eyes are on Harry. As of course we know that he has arrived in London.
Princes William and Harry have paid tribute to their grandfather, the Duke of Edinburgh, describing him as a man of service and great humour. But the statements from the feuding brothers came separately as royal watchers wait to see if Prince Philip's funeral will help to heal their rift. Joining me now live is royal commentator Annabelle Sanderson. Annabelle, thank you for joining me. Prince Harry has now arrived in London. This will be the first time he is reunited with the family since that Oprah interview.
Yes, exactly. This is the first time he's been back on UK soil for some time now. I think since about since the Commonwealth ceremony in Westminster Abbey, where the reception between the different members of the royal family was quite frosty, I'd say. So because Prince Charles has made his statement now, it's appropriate for William and Harry to make their statements. They were both obviously very fulsome of praise of their grandfather, who obviously played a massive part in their lives, but they were quite different. William's was much more formal, I'd say, made a big point of talking about the role that Prince Philip played in the Duchess of Cambridge's life as well, and how close they were. Harry's was much more relaxed, talking about, the grandfather in charge of the barbecue. So it's nice that they've both now officially made their statements, all in line with royal protocol. But of course now all eyes are on Harry in the UK without his wife as we prepare for the funeral at the weekend.
Yeah, and you mentioned in that statement from the Duke of Cambridge, he said, "Catherine and I will continue to do what he would have wanted and will support the Queen in the years ahead." Do you think, Annabelle, that this may have been a subtle dig at Meghan?
And possibly Harry as well. I remember when I was working on with the Royal British Legion on D-Day 65, and it was when the Queen the French had forgotten to invite the Queen to the remembrance events in France. And the subtlety of the statement that came out of Buckingham Palace, it's always what they don't say rather than what they do say. In this instance, they were very much, we will continue with our role, which is, we're in a very privileged position. Prince Philip was always about duty, always about supporting the Queen. And whilst Philip would have wanted Harry to do what made him happy, I'm sure he would have been very disappointed that he left, stepped back and moved to America.
There is also reports this morning that Meghan told friends privately that...
So they were up to date, and as we know that Harry is there, so it is good to see that. Well, right now, for the final news for today, there is the growing number of cases of coronavirus in India. Here's the report.
Most of the people believed that the epidemic was over as far as India was concerned. And therefore, I think the forecast of this particular happening did not really register in the policymaker circles. The real threat is not so much in the number of cases. The threat will be in the number of deaths. Serious infections flooding the hospitals. And that is where we do need a two-pronged action. One is to contain the transmission through resolute action, preventing crowding and insisting on masks being worn in public everywhere without exception, and preventing the super spreader events. The second is vaccinating, particularly those who are vulnerable.
And of course, we know that getting the vaccine out there and preventing the number of deaths will be the top priority. And looking at that priority, I think the government and the authorities are trying to do the best they can under the circumstances. As we know, the numbers just escalated when India seemed to be getting on top of things and started, even sending the vaccination out to many other countries. So right now, all the exports have been stopped, and the local consumption is first, and treatment of all the frontline workers and others will take place first before they even look at the export strategy. Well, right now, let's take a very quick look at all the functions and events taking place here in Brisbane. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's all we have time for you. Don't forget that next up we'll bring to you a special documentary on the Bharatiya Navvars or the Hindu New Year. And that is brought to you by the courtesy of Old Well Gayatri Parivar in Haridwar. And as many people would probably like to know, just a note that that segment there would be presented in Hindi. Well, right now it's time to say goodbye. It's so good to see you, and it's always good to have your company. And on this 13th day of April 21. And until the next segment, it's goodbye from me. Enjoy the rest of the day and remain safe, and wishing everyone the best for Ram Navami and all the different names that you might call Bharatiya Navvars with. and of course all our Muslim brothers and sisters, Ramadan Mubarak.